Today we're talking about the glue that keeps the G.I. Joe operatives both cohesive and operating with combined force lethality, a guy who uses slang as a code name. Yes, this name goes back to the US forces and Britain's RAF during World War II, a name that they used for wireless radio operators. That's right, today is all about SPARKS. Alessandro Alex Verdi was born in Carcare, Italy. The Action Force Z-Force radio operator Gianni Paolo Brazzi hails from Milan, Italy, which is only about 2.5 hours from Alex's hometown. Alex's Devil's Due data desk profile says that Sparks is the son of a former U.S. ambassador to Italy and was born in-country during his parents' extended assignment there. Growing up in an area with multiple languages spoken, Alex developed a love for linguistics and the spoken word, and when his family returned to America, Alex began to study linguistics and etymology and ultimately earning, with honors, multiple degrees from Harvard. It was at Harvard when Sparks learned of the military's need for interpreters, and he had his direction. He felt like being an interpreter would be a good fit for him because he is a self-proclaimed pacifist. We also learn in his profile that Sparks, because he loves words, reads a lot, and is the author of over 15 best-selling books. So to initiate this journey, Alex enlisted in the United States Army, going through basic and then AIT, where he earned an electronic warfare cryptologic operations specialist MOS, which is 98X, which has since been replaced with 35Q, a cryptologic network warfare specialist. So Verdi went to Naval Air Station Pensacola, Corey Station for his advanced individual training. This is when he became proficient in various forms of intelligence gathering and analysis with human signals, electronics, cyber, and even geospatial intelligence gathering methodologies. Alex is also trained as a telecommunications officer, which allowed him not just to view and analyze inbound data, but install, operate, and maintain a variety of systems and networks for radio, cable, satellite transmissions, microwave, and internet, and multi-channels from C2 all the way up to C4 ISR, all with ComSec in mind. Because he's a G.I. Joe now, it's sort of a blending of 74 and 31 series MOSs. This makes Sparks a vital, critical component of the team's mission planning, ensuring there's communication and coordination between units, aiding with battle space awareness and passing along op boards and other communiques from command to all their ground, sea, and air elements. Alex's name, though unofficial, has some interesting connections. Handel, one of opera's greatest Baroque-era composers, wrote his opera about Alexander the Great in 1726 called Alessandro. Giuseppe Verdi, who's famous for Otello, Ada, and the three operas, which includes Rigoletto, Il Trovatore, and La Traviata, was another of the greatest of all time, up there with Bach, Puccini, Beethoven, Wagner, Scarlatti, and very few others. Opera is essentially a method of communicating through music, conducting components and parts that make up the greater whole to produce their operatic works. With this in mind, Sparks, in essence, is a conductor of combat symphony, relying on his communication skills and equipment to direct different elements to drive our veritable ARH soap opera toward a victorious final act. Larry Hama himself is familiar with musical communication, being a musician himself, who also starred in Stephen Sondheim's Pacific Overtures musical on Broadway. This part's purely speculation on my part, but the connections do make sense. Enough so, in fact, that the British government has used this type of naming convention in the past. For example, Handel is the name of the nuclear warning system that Great Britain used during Cold War through the 1980s. It was a communication system used to warn police stations that an attack was imminent. The main injection site for that system was the headquarters of Strike Command at RAF High Wycombe. ICBM attacks on this system would give a 4-minute warning, while a bomber attack would give 15 minutes to get to minimum safe distance. Also in 1987, Verdi was a technological demonstrator to see how comms and sensor equipment could reduce crew numbers and improve both performance and safety. There, Verdi was an acronym meaning Vehicle Electronics Research Defense Initiative. It was built on a FV-510 Warrior base, one of the British Army's IFVs. Household Cavalry even ran Verdi 2, a two-man configuration in trials, as a mobile protected comms and data hub which would communicate with the troop leader's Alvis Stormer IFV in real time. The Stormer is part of the CVRT family of AFVs. In any case, recognizing this capability, General Lawrence Flagg pulled Sparks as one of his very first for a new team he was standing up, a new rapid deployment force, which was Special Counter-Terrorist Group Delta, codenamed G.I. Joe. Sparks was General Flagg's go-to radio operator and analyst, and he also became a personal advisor to General Joe Colton. He used the codename SPARKS, as I mentioned, which is slang for a radio operator, and that really goes back further than that, back to spark gap transmitters, some of the first radio transmitters that were used through World War I until the invention of the vacuum tube radio transmitters. In Sparks' profile, he is regarded as the unsung hero among the unsung. He's the pre- and post-op guy who files all the AARs, all the reports, all their recs, and without him keeping all this moving, G.I. Joe operations would grind to a halt under the severe weight of the bureaucratic process. And in Devil's Due Publishing's G.I. Joe Declassified miniseries written by Larry Hama himself, we get to see Sparks in the nascent days of the team. He was in a sub-level of the Pentagon in a special access room, and this is where we learned that it was Sparks who recommended Steeler to the Joe team. We also learned that Sparks was with the Flagg when Colonel Clayton Hawk Abernathy was court-martialed and nearly didn't make it onto the team. At that time, Hawk was a hardliner and, as Sparks whispered to Flagg, had put every officer above him in the place of being morally inferior if they didn't fall on Hawk's sword. So Sparks didn't want him for the team, but Flagg did, so Sparks' solution after Flagg decided he was going to join the team was to make it so that Hawk was top, that there wasn't anyone on the team that would be above him. Sparks is also the one who activated Jody Shooter Craig, a sniper for the team who served as Overwatch and a mission backstop, ensuring its success even though this led to her demise during Operation Lady Doomsday, the very first mission from G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, Issue 1. Sparks was with the Flagg when the general recruited Flash to the team, and so Sparks helped Gambello get ready to transfer to Fort Wadsworth. He also joined Flagg when he confronted the general who initiated Hawk's court-martial, revealing that that general was one of the secret cabal of generals at the Pentagon called the Jugglers. They also exposed that general for setting up an operation with a mercenary named Major Sebastian Blood. Sparks later went with Flagg to visit and pay respects to Shooter's mother. In February 2006's G.I. Joe Special Missions Manhattan, Sparks made his first comic book appearance, if we go by publishing chronology. Sparks was at the G.I. Joe headquarters codenamed The Rock with General Colton when Stalker called in with a sit-rep. Sparks uploaded a location to Stalker's field team, diverting them to take on an extremist group holed up in an old Cobra biolab. He then activated Beachhead, Tunnel Rat, Lowlight, Mercer, and Covergirl for the op in Manhattan, and he worked with Tunnel Rat to put the team on the trail of a Cobra operative named Neurotoxin. Sparks then made the jump to G.I. Joe America's Elite in the spring of 2006 with issue 11, and here he met up with General Colton to tell him they were having trouble tracking down everyone on the Joe's reserves list, making them worry that Major Blood was indeed taking out their operators and agents one by one. This is around the time that Snake Eyes had been turned and the Red Ninjas were causing problems in Mongolia for Scarlet and that team. In America's Elite issue 14, Marine 1 with POTUS came to visit the Rock with his chief of staff Garrett Friedlow, who by the way was really Cobra Commander in disguise, along with a chair-bound General Hawk who was serving in an advisory role. Garrett wanted to replace G.I. Joe with General Ray and the Phoenix Guard. While Colton gave them the White Gloves tour, Sparks cut in to say that Stalker's team was inbound and on approach to set down in 20. That's when the Phoenix Guard assaulted the Rock, and in that fight, Sparks was severely wounded as he tried to wipe the data desk files to prevent Cobra from getting all their classified intel. General Colton let Sparks recover at the home he shared with Jane just outside of Yellowstone National Park. In that battle, they lost 37 people, and Sparks said that they should raise their glasses in their honor. After the Blackwater prison break by Wraith, the Baroness was now on the run, and Cobra Commander had the Baroness's baby. It was Sparks using Mars Industry backchannel account access that they were put on to the Swiss Alps, though Baroness gunned down Wraith in a cemetery in Prague beforehand. For Special Missions Tokyo, Sparks helped analyze a disc that mercenary Budo had sent to Jinx about a coup, so they put together a new team to investigate, and that team was Clutch and Rock and Roll, who were on leave in Saigon along with Wild Bill and Gung Ho. Major Blood seemingly killed G.I. Joe Recondo around this time, but Recondo wasn't truly dead. He just went to ground and off the books, and he was able to let Sparks know this secretly. Sparks let Recondo operate in the black. The only person who knew Recondo was still out in the field, still alive. General Colton at the Rock came up with a plan to let Baroness lead them right to Cobra Commander. Colton and Sparks served in this story as an effective break from the action, and their exposition was a good way to make sure that all the readers were caught up with the story. They did just this in America's Elite issue 25 when Colton caught him up on Cobra Commander taking over Mars, while POTUS expanded the Joe's roster to be able to respond to those new threats. And with that in mind, Sparks then updated Colton on the current threat matrix. Sparks was the one who got the message from Agent Delta that World War III had begun. So Sparks met with Colton and Hawk, which after he's already scoured the Pentagon's no foreign files, that he learned that Agent Delta was so classified it was top secret SCI. Agent Delta was operating as a deep cover agent who'd infiltrated Cobra during its early days and had remained off the grid for years. And they were talking about this in a regular office, but with that level of sensitivity, they should have been in a skiff and not just a regular office, but whatever. General Colton tasked Sparks with making contact and building rapport with Agent Delta. When the Rock was attacked again, Sparks was shot in the shoulder. He told Hawk, "This is one of those times I'm starting to rethink the whole pacifism thing." He managed to get a coded message out to Duke's team for help. They made it out and made it to a cabin in Priest Lake, Idaho, their new base where he worked with Jane, Firewall, Hawk, and for a brief moment Storm Shadow as they managed the movement of all the players on the board. Through this ordeal, Sparks worked so much he ended up falling asleep right at his station. Colton woke him up when they learned that Fort Meade had fallen to Cobra, meaning the NSA was under Cobra's control too, as that's where the Puzzle Palace was located. When Storm Shadow brought Destro and Baroness to the cabin, the General put Sparks and Firewall in charge of briefing them on the Joe's recent intel on Mars tech. Sparks said they could brief them next, but it would have to be on the flight to London where Destro's son Alexander was holed up with Mistress Armada. By issue 35 of America's Elite, they were in Yorkshire, England, and Sparks almost got in a fight with Destro because they both had bunk information they shared with each other. When they were arguing, another assault team infiltrated Fort Meade to upload a virus that Sparks had made to trip the system into rebooting. And so despite arguing, Sparks and Destro were able to sabotage the Mars satellite array on base there, which crippled Cobra's strategic advantage after the nukes were subsequently deactivated. Sparks and the team flew back stateside and they met up at Fort Meade in Maryland. Sparks and Barrel immediately got a new mission, something he was okay with doing now that Firewall could do his comms and crypto duties on base. In the Appalachian Mountains during one battle, Sparks called for support, but Major Blood ambushed him and managed to get a knife to Sparks' throat, but a Joe disguised as a Viper saved him. Who was that Joe? It was Recondo after all this time. They got the knife off to Sparks' throat so they could Charlie Mike, and they ended up taking down Cobra Commander. Mission success. Bravo Zulu team. He was again at the station at the Rock in Special Missions Antarctica. In this story, he'd received an image of barrels of oil emblazoned with the Extensive Enterprise logo, a front company here which was run by Tomax and Zaymont, the Crimson Twins. Sparks used a thermal imaging satellite that he ran over Antarctica to find a petroleum reserve that the oil had been pulled from, and so Sparks and Colton activated Frostbite, Iceberg, and Snowjob to meet up with Duke, Stalker, Scarlet, and Snake Eyes at McMurdo Station to stage for the op. In G.I. Joe Special Missions Brazil, Sparks was still at the Rock with General Colton when Mainframe called in with some intel from a mission in Brazil. They went off the books. Comms were off, save for the pre-recorded message Sparks and Colton had just listened to, and they were operating in-country on a drug interdiction mission, hoping to take down Headman. And so after all these stories and missions, Sparks eventually left the team and went on to be a liaison for military intelligence, where he focused on operating secret number stations to field operatives around the globe. If you're not familiar with number stations, they're essentially shortwave radio stations that broadcast code out to the field. They use shortwave transmitters positioned at angles to bounce a signal off the Earth's ionosphere, which enables them to send a signal over the horizon and at a great distance. They're transmitting strings of numbers that can only be decoded with the right cipher key. On the animation side, the G.I. Joe Writer's Guide for the Sunbow series by Steve Gerber and Buzz Dixon for the series tells its writers, quote, "No more Sparks," and instead lists Breaker in the new column, being their de facto comms guy. Sparks, however, did appear in episodes like The Revenge of Cobra, Cobra Stops the World, and Gray Hairs and Growing Pains before Breaker finally took his place. This whole time, Sparks was on base monitoring broadcasts and comms from the Joe's deployed assets. The animated version of Sparks retired from service and ended up finding work at a TV station. In 2007, Sparks was included in the Tanks for the Memories box set for a convention exclusive that year, along with a plethora of other Joes who had to do battle against the Cobra Night Stalkers shock troopers and their CO Night Stalker commander, aka Rebecca Bristol of Perth, Australia. Interestingly, for this figure, they used older, molded parts from Breaker and Dialtone to make Sparks, forming a Voltron telecom force, if you will. And with that bad joke on the books, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.